Somewhere between who you were and who you became, there is a gap. Not a dramatic one. Nothing that announced itself clearly enough that you could have pointed to it at the time and said, "This is where it happened. This is the moment things changed." It was quieter than that. It happened in the spaces between moments, in the slow accumulation of small adjustments you made so gradually that none of them ever felt like a loss. A little less of this, a little more of that. One more part of yourself folded away, because the room required something different and it was easier to adjust than to ask the room to change. And then one day, probably recently, probably in a quiet moment you were not expecting, you caught a glimpse of who you used to be. Then an old photograph maybe, or in the middle of a song that used to mean something, or in a conversation where someone asked what you wanted and you opened your mouth and felt, for just a second, completely blank. Not sad, not broken, just unfamiliar to yourself, like a house you lived in for years that you walked back into and did not quite recognize anymore. Stay with me. Because what Carl Jung discovered about the specific way empaths disappear, not dramatically, not visibly, but in the precise and quiet way that only someone paying very close attention would ever notice, is something I think part of you has been waiting to hear for a long time. And by the end of this, you will understand something about where you went. And more importantly, that you can still find your way back. Carl Jung said something once that I have never been able to let go of since I first encountered it. He said that the greatest tragedy in human psychology is not that people suffer. It is that people disappear while they are still present. That they continue going through the motions of their lives, showing up, functioning, being seen by everyone around them, while the thing that made them most fundamentally themselves quietly recedes until it is barely accessible even to them. Most people think this happens to people who had terrible things happen to them. Dramatic losses, visible trauma, the kind of story that explains the change clearly to anyone listening. But Jung discovered that the empaths who came to him had almost always disappeared in a way nobody noticed, including themselves. Not because nothing had happened to them, but because what had happened was too gradual, too incremental, too wrapped in the language of maturity and responsibility, and being good for others to ever be identified as the slow erosion it actually was. Here is how it happens, and I want you to notice whether any of this feels familiar. Not intellectually familiar, physically familiar, in the body, in the specific recognition of something you have lived through but never had named. It starts with an environment that needs something from you. A family, a relationship, a workplace, a friendship, a dynamic of some kind that, consciously or not, has a role in it that fits perfectly onto your specific combination of sensitivity and people-pleasing, and deep fundamental inability to watch someone be uncomfortable when you have the capacity to ease it, and you step into that role. Not because anyone put a gun to your head, not because you were explicitly told this was what you had to be, but because you are an empath, and empaths read the room, and the room was asking for something, and you had it to give, so you gave it. Jung called this the adoption of the adaptive self, the version of you that forms in response to what an environment needs rather than what you actually are. And in the beginning, the adaptive self is not a mask. It is a choice. A reasonable, loving, genuinely good-hearted choice to show up in the way the situation requires. The problem is what happens when the choice stops being a choice. When the adaptive self becomes so habitual and so thoroughly the version of you that every environment expects, that the other version, the one underneath, the one that existed before you started adapting, gets less and less air. But here is where it gets dangerous for empaths specifically. And this is where Jung's work becomes absolutely essential. Because Jung discovered that the adaptive self does not just replace the authentic self over time, it convinces the authentic self that it was never appropriate in the first place. This is the most devastating part of the disappearance. Not that the authentic self is suppressed, that it begins to agree with the suppression. Think about the parts of you that used to exist more fully, the opinions you used to have that you do not share anymore, because you learned somewhere along the way that having them created friction. The desires you used to acknowledge that you stopped mentioning because the response you got enough times was some version of that is not realistic or you are being too much. The specific quality of aliveness you used to feel in certain situations that you can barely remember now, because it has been so long since you allowed yourself to be in situations that called for it. Those things did not disappear because you decided they were unimportant. They disappeared because enough of the world responded to them in ways that taught you they were inconvenient. And the adaptive self, the version of you that survives by making itself useful and acceptable, quietly agreed and filed them away, and eventually stopped leaving space for them at all. Jung called this the internalization of the world's verdict. The moment when the empath stops needing external pressure to suppress their authentic self because they have absorbed the instruction so completely they now do it themselves, automatically, without noticing. Without anyone asking, listen carefully to what happens next, because this is the part most people miss entirely. Jung noticed something specific about the moment an empath realizes they have disappeared. Most people would call it a crisis. Jung called it an invitation, because the recognition, the specific moment of looking around your own life and feeling unfamiliar in it, is not a sign that something has finally gone wrong. It is a sign that something is finally going right. The authentic self does not send that signal from a place of defeat. It sends it from a place of persistence. It has been there this whole time, beneath the adaptive version, beneath the years of adjusting and folding and making yourself into the shape required by whatever room you happen to be in. It never left. It got quiet, but quiet is not gone. And the fact that you can feel the gap, the fact that you know something is missing even if you cannot fully name what, means the authentic self is still close enough to reach. But here is the part that will absolutely change your life. Because Jung did not just say the authentic self was reachable. He said it was recoverable. Fully. Not the pre-adaptation version exactly. Not the person you were before any of this happened. That version belonged to a time and a context that no longer exists, and trying to return to it would be like trying to walk back into a room that has been renovated since you left. But something more interesting than that. He said the authentic self that emerges after someone has consciously chosen to stop disappearing, after they have done the specific interior work of recognizing the adaptive self for what it is and deliberately creating space for what was underneath it. That self is not the same as the original. It is more complete because it has something the original did not have. The knowledge of what it costs to abandon yourself, the specific clarity that only comes from having lived inside the adaptive version long enough to know every room it cannot reach, every relationship it cannot fully inhabit, every moment of genuine aliveness it cannot access because it is too busy managing everyone else's experience of you. Jung called this the recovered self, and he said it is the most grounded, most present, most genuinely powerful version of a person that psychology ever produces. Not the self before the disappearance, the self that came back, knowing exactly what it had lost, and having made a conscious choice, not a dramatic one, not a public one, just a quiet internal one, to stop letting it happen again. So what does coming back actually look like? Not a grand reinvention, not burning everything down to build something new in the rubble. Something quieter than that, and harder than that, and more daily than that. It looks like noticing the moment you start to adapt, when adaptation is not actually required, the moment you fold something away out of habit rather than necessity, the moment you reach for the acceptable version of what you actually think instead of the actual version, because the actual version feels risky, and pausing, not always acting differently, not immediately, just pausing long enough to notice that the choice is there, that you are making it, that there is a version of this moment in which you do not disappear. Jung said that this noticing, this small, consistent practice of catching the adaptive self in the act, is more powerful than any single dramatic act of self-reclamation, because the disappearance happened incrementally, and so does the return, one small noticed moment at a time, until one day you look around and realize you recognize yourself again. Not perfectly, not without the marks of everything that happened in between, but recognizably, undeniably, yourself. The version of you that disappeared was not weak. It was adaptive. And in the environments and relationships where the adaptation happened, it was sometimes the only version of yourself that was survivable. You were not wrong to build it. You are only wrong if you mistake it for the final version, because it was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be temporary shelter in conditions that required shelter. And those conditions do not last forever, which means the shelter does not have to either. Jung spent his entire life pointing people back toward themselves, not the self they wished they were, not the self other people needed them to be, the self that was there before the world got its hands on it and started editing. That self is still there, quieter than it used to be, but still there, still yours, still entirely worth coming back for. If you felt something, reading this, not just understood it but felt it somewhere specific, that feeling is not nostalgia, it is not grief exactly. It is recognition, the authentic self recognizing itself being described. And that recognition is the first step of something that does not have a dramatic name but matters more than almost anything. Share this with the empath in your life who has been different lately, who seems fine but somehow less present than they used to be, who laughs at the right moments and says the right things, but something behind their eyes has gone, quieter than it was before. They need to hear that what they are losing can be found again. And subscribe, because what is coming next is for the empath who is ready to stop adapting to every room and start walking into rooms as exactly who they are.